Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Tamara Shaw with Nutrena Feeds, and I am joined tonight by Abby Keegan, who is our equine tech specialist. She is a font of knowledge on horse nutrition, and today we are going to talk about some of our most frequently asked questions about senior horses. So we are really just going to jump right into it because we have a lot of questions to get to. But first, let's say hi to Abby. Hi, Abby.
Hey, Tamara, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm excited to talk with you for a little bit about some of our old timers, as we like to call them.
Me too. These guys are my favorite. It is probably the most rewarding group of horses to work with are these old guys. So near and dear to my heart indeed.
Oh, absolutely. I feel the same way. I feel like they do so much for us. And when they get to that later stage in life, we love to really take care of them. And what better way to do that than through nutrition?
Absolutely.
So let's jump right into it. Let's start here and let's look at some of these frequently asked questions that we see either via our social media channels or we have people that call in. So these are some of them that have come to us recently, and we also invite you to include your questions. And if we don't get to them tonight, we will respond to you via our social pages and be happy to walk you through any questions you have regarding your senior horse. So the first question we get asked all the time is, how do I tell if my horse is reaching senior status? Is it strictly an age number, Abby, or are there things to look for, and is there a range on the age of a senior?
Yeah, such a good question, Tamara. So many times I think we think about, these older horses and automatically, if your horse is, let's say 15 years old or 20 years old, that we need to put them on, a senior feed. And it's just not the case necessarily. There is no defined age at which a horse is technically a senior. We kind of use that 15 to 20 or 15 to 18 year category. But it really depends on how that horse is still digesting and utilizing the nutrients they're being given. So there's definitely signs that we can watch for, as horses start to maybe lose their top line or lose body condition. They don't handle the winter as well. They start maybe quitting their hay, meaning they're chewing. But then you look around in their dry lot or their stall or in the pasture, maybe where they've been eating that hay, and you can see kind of these massive little balls of residue that they didn't quite get chewed up. So those are some things we can watch for, but there's definitely not, an age where we say, oh, we, need to change this horse's diet. It's really monitoring body condition, top line, and how that horse is adjusting.
Sure. Oh, that's great to know. I mean, I'm sure it's probably a lot like humans, we're all individuals, and horses are individuals too. So, I mean, I know I have a 22-year-old who acts like a 5-year-old. So, and I'm sure there are some opposite where, maybe the horse is a little younger, but already showing signs of senior status. So that is super helpful information.
Yeah.
Good to know. Okay. Next question. You touched on it a little bit, but if my horse is considered senior in age, does he need to be on a senior horse feed?
Yeah, let's talk more about that. That's a great one. So I'll use one of my geldings in the barn. He's a great example. He is 22 years old. He is clearly a senior horse. He just actually was diagnosed with Cushing's this year. I've kind of been wondering, but we actually went ahead and did an ACTH testing with him with my veterinarian and insulin as well. Anyway, so he does really great though from a top line perspective in his body condition, just being maintained on a really nice quality forage. So I actually feed it free choice essentially in not a small whole hay net, but a medium-sized whole hay net, I would say, because he needs the calories from the hay. But he doesn't need a ton of extra feed on top of that hay to maintain his body condition. So meaning over his ribs. So I'm actually able to utilize Empower Top Line Balance. He gets 2 pounds of that a day on top of his hay. And then of course some salt sprinkled on. But that actually maintains him well. So his body condition is great. He's about a 5.5 for a body condition right now. And his top line looks phenomenal for, especially being a 22-year-old with Cushing's or PPID. Oftentimes we see these guys really start to lose that muscle mass. He could be on a senior feed, but we would have to feed him, closer to probably 8 pounds a day, which he maybe doesn't need those calories with the forage that I've got. So the diet balancer works phenomenal and power top line balance for these older horses that don't need the calories that a senior feed would contain, but they still need all those critical trace minerals, those amino acids to keep their top line built. And just keep them healthy as we move on in age. So,
oh, that's great. Yeah, and actually, your situation sounds very similar to mine. Same thing. My horse is 22. He doesn't need a lot, so he's doing the same thing, getting the top line balance along with some good quality hay. And I think he looks great for his age. So that's really, really helpful to understand. I don't know, do you want to touch a little bit on, what a top line balance or a ration diet balancer is for maybe those who aren't familiar?
Yeah. So a diet balancer, as we kind of air quotes call them, the one I use is Empower Top Line Balance right now with him. So it is it's a super concentrated feed. So it's designed that you don't have to feed much of it because we don't need the calories for some of these horses. But it's designed to basically provide everything that is not in the forage. So one of the beautiful parts about our company is we actually have our own Forage Analysis Lab. So, I've been here for 18 years and analyzed thousands of samples of hay, and there isn't, I've never come across one yet that meets all of a horse's optimal nutrient requirements. So there's always something that's missing. And essentially we've looked at a lot of those, and that's how we built like the Empower Top Line Balance, for example, is to bring in the missing trace minerals, the missing amino acids that are not present in most forages. So, where you would traditionally need to feed maybe 8 pounds of a traditional feed for his size of body weight, he's a 1,375 pound quarter horse gelding, versus I can feed 2 pounds of Empower Top Line Balance and provide the same amino acids and trace mineral levels as what would be in that 8 pounds of a traditional senior feed.
Sure. Thank you. That's a really helpful explanation, because I know it can get a little confusing between, what's the difference between a diet balancer and an actual grain or feed. And actually, speaking of differences in feed, one of the questions we do get a lot, is there really a difference between a senior feed that's formulated specifically for senior horses and just, a feed for a younger horse? So maybe let's take, for example, Safe Choice. We'll use, Safe Choice Senior versus Safe Choice Original. What are the differences in those that would steer someone more toward a senior feed?
Sure. So generally, like in the Safe Choice Senior versus the original, for example, we really focus on more highly soluble fiber and highly digestible fiber. So like the original would have a high fiber content as well, but it's going to go to a further extent in the senior product because we know, traditionally those horses are going to have more challenges in digesting those fibers and really needing more calories. That's another big one, is the senior product is going to have more calories per pound than a lot of your traditional other feeds. Also the fat content. So again, talking about calories and where we're sourcing them from, we obviously want to use soluble fiber, but we're also going to pull in some fat sources as well. We also tend to kind of keep that non-structural carbohydrate level fairly moderate and again, controlled. Just again, thinking about where we're pulling all these calories in. Another thing is oftentimes, again, these guys might struggle to digest and absorb and utilize the fiber they consume, which is primarily from forages, hay, unless they're not able to chew anymore, which we'll talk about in a second, if they've lost all their teeth, or most of them. But we actually start to think about how do we help these horses utilize the fiber they're consuming. So one of the neat things that we got to do years ago in the Safe Choice Senior, for example, is we added what's called our NutriBloom technology. And so essentially it's a combination of pre, pro, postbiotics that help the horse to get more out of all the fiber they eat, right? Mm-hmm. So you think about, you know, again, the normal horse should be consuming as much forage as they possibly can if they're able to chew it. And so we actually had some nice trials at Texas A&M that demonstrated we could increase that fiber utilization by 15%. So with that NutriBloom in there.
That's great. That's, you know, so important for these senior guys. And, you know, I honestly probably wouldn't have thought about the fiber difference, but that's really helpful information.
Yeah.
So another question we get quite often is, you know, how do I feed a senior horse that's a pasture potato versus a senior horse that is still considered a performance senior? You know, we're still out there actively competing, riding all the time. You know, what would be the difference between feeding those two types of horses?
Yeah. So probably honestly a little bit less than what we sometimes would think. I think so often we get hung up on thinking, well, we have to have something different, but oftentimes we can make, again, I think it goes back to what is the foundation of the diet? Is that older senior performance horse able to still chew? And if they are, right, we can still use forage, a good quality forage. It's got a lot of calories in it. It's very digestible as the foundation of the diet. And if that works for that particular individual performance horse, I'm thinking about a reiner that my son used to show. You know, I think he was 23 years old at the time. And he ate a really good quality alfalfa, primarily alfalfa, forage, and that maintained the most of his body weight. And so we really only had to we used a diet balancer at just a couple pounds a day to balance that out. And he had phenomenal lean muscle tissue. You know, obviously he was a reiner, so he was working really, really hard. Whereas, you know, some performance horses that are air quotes seniors, right? So sometimes we have these upper teens and 20-some-year-olds that we've still got performing, which is, oh, if we could have more of them, amen to that. Some of them do require more calories. And so, you know, sometimes we have to come in with something at a higher feeding rate. You know, we've got a product called ProForce Senior, which is designed more for a horse that is working hard and does need those calories and needs to replenish and rebuild that muscle after exercise, but needs more calories. And so, you know, you might feed something like that at, you know, 7-8 pounds a day, with maybe the forage is average, or they're not able to chew it as well. Or, you know, some cases you get what you get from a forage perspective. So if you need more calories, then I would gear more towards those performance senior type diets.
Great. That's really helpful. And, you know, like you said, we don't have to change just because the situation has changed. But again, it's all about their individual makeup and their needs.
Yeah.
That's great. Really helpful. Okay. We had another question come in. You know, how do I balance grain with the forage for my older horses? So someone had asked the question that, you know, their horse wasn't really interested in eating a lot of grain, so they were more interested in the hay and the forage. You know, how do you balance that? I know you've touched on it a little bit, but is there anything else that we would dive into here?
Yeah. So hopefully, I don't know if that horse in particular, if this owner is having plenty of body condition. Again, body condition when we're meaning over that horse's ribs, simply put. You know, with a summer hair coat, I cannot see those ribs. With a winter hair coat, I can push and find them, but I can't easily feel them. So if that horse has a good body condition and prefers to eat hay, thumbs up. That's awesome, right? Horses are designed to consume and ferment forages. That's why they have this massive hindgut. And so again, for those types of horses, if she can help that horse to eat lots of forage, and then we can simply use something that is designed with that really small feeding rate, because he doesn't want to eat a lot of grain. That's perfect. So empower top line balance, again, just like what I'm doing with my old guy. And I think you do the same thing. Just 2 pounds a day will work great for that individual.
Awesome. Thank you.
I guess I should say on the flip side too, if the horse is having trouble maintaining body weight and doesn't want to eat grain, prefers the forage, certainly get as much forage as we can into that horse and choose something that's got more calories in it as well. So something that, as you think about that plant as it grows in the field, whether it was a grass or a legume like alfalfa, as that plant gets mature, there's a peak of maturity where it's most digestible and provides the most calories to the horse. If it was more mature, right, as the plant grows taller, the stem gets thicker, and it becomes more difficult for the horse to break down that fiber and use it as calories. So if that's the case, finding something that is higher in calories, a senior type product, we would have a Pro Force Senior or a Safe Choice Senior that the horse wants to eat. And sometimes that can be a little bit tricky. Sometimes some horses, you have to switch them back and forth once in a while. There could be other things going on as well. Maybe that horse has some kind of ulcers or high gut disturbance. And so those are other pieces we can start to think about and address as well.
Would it be safe to use like a fat supplement with a senior horse, like a boost or something? Or do you think we should steer away from that?
No, that's a great idea, Tamara. Yeah. So to even add more calories in, you can certainly look to a fat supplement on top of one, and again, I always caution people, make sure you've got the diet balanced first before you start adding the fat in. So we've got to make sure we've got those amino acids addressed, the trace minerals, the vitamins. So let's say you were feeding, 8 pounds of Safe Choice Senior, all the hay this horse wants to eat, and we still want to add a few more calories. We could add on, 2 pounds of like an Empower Boost is a great example of an extruded fat nugget.
All right. Super. Let's see. This is a good one. Okay. So my senior horse used to be nice and round, and now he has lost weight over his back. So essentially his top line does not look great. What can I do to help him?
Yeah, good question. So sometimes, right, as these horses age, they, just like people, it becomes more difficult to maintain muscle.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. So I think number one, we've got to look at his diet. So sometimes these horses live on diets that maybe we weren't following the feeding directions is what I find a lot. So maybe they were feeding like something like a Safe Choice and they were only feeding 2 pounds a day to this 1,300 pound horse. But he maintained body weight. So he kind of looked fat and he kind of carried more fat over his top line. And now that he's becoming older, it's becoming more evident that he's basically been deficient in amino acids throughout his life. So those horses that have lost top line like that and aren't as round over their top line, we've got to add more amino acids to the diet that are digestible, that are bioavailable, and that are properly balanced. So, if that horse was eating a traditional feed at however many pounds a day, I would just add something like Empower Top Line Balance on top as a supplement. Or if that horse was just on forage alone and used to look great, he's telling us that you can see more now that this horse is deficient in top line. So again, 2 pounds a day to balance out that forage.
Great.
Top line balance. Sorry, should have been more clear.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I feel like we're hearing this a lot more as people are understanding more and more about that importance of the horse's top line. I think people are noticing more where maybe years ago they wouldn't really have given it a second thought. They'd just say, "Oh, my horse is getting old. That's what happens." So it's nice to know that doesn't always have to be that way.
Yes, I'm a huge proponent. I feel like if we can ensure, and again, I think such a big part of it is, it sounds so simple, but read whatever product you're feeding, go look at the feeding directions and make sure you're at least in the middle of the range. So many times I see these older horses that just, they maintain weight, body condition easly. And sometimes they carried some fat over their top line. So owners thought, well, they're healthy, right? They're fine. And they're 10 years old, whatever. But as they get older, it becomes more evident quickly. Well, if we could have had that horse on a balanced diet when they were younger, could they stay stronger, right? Could they maintain themselves? Because we think about, that top line is essentially like our core. And I'm going to sit up a little straighter in my chair now.
Yeah, me too.
Because we support our core, right? We support our spine and everything else stays better balance. So, it's certainly nutrition is one piece of it. Exercise is a whole nother piece that you can add on top. We can build top line with just nutrition, believe it or not. We've got great studies proving that. But if we can add nutrition and add exercise on top, that's, when we see our biggest benefit, of course.
Yeah. Like you said, just like us, we need to watch our diet and exercise. So unfortunately, perfect. Well, we have one more, commonly asked question that we get. This one is related to metabolic issues. So someone wrote in, my senior horse has PPID. Should I feed him differently? Or what is the best diet for a horse that has metabolic issues?
Oh, such a good question. Yeah, I think it's estimated that approximately, I'm going to get this number wrong, but I want to say it's about 30%, they believe, of these horses, especially over the age of 15, probably have PPID or Cushing's, as it's more commonly known, which is pretty amazing. I think oftentimes it goes undiagnosed as well. And so PPID, or pituitary pars intermedia dysfunction, is essentially a problem with the horse's pars intermedia, so part of their pituitary gland, and they don't regulate hormones quite as well as they would. And so oftentimes we see these, shaggy hair coats, horses not shedding like normal. They start to lose even more top line or muscle over the sides of their hips, and some increased urination, things like that, more drinking, whatnot. But essentially, so I was just talking about that gelding, and I'm pointing to him out here in the barn. But he's 22 again. We know that he does have PPID, and I've managed him from a nutritional standpoint for a long time, but now my veterinarian has put him on, obviously the FDA approved version of Pergolide, from a medical or medication standpoint. But for him, again, the big thing from a dietary perspective with these guys is making sure that we have a controlled NSC diet, which is non-structural carbohydrates. If they have insulin dysregulation, and so you can talk with your veterinarian about, does my horse just have PPID, or are they also insulin dysregulated, or sometimes people might refer to it as equine metabolic syndrome. If they have both, we really need to manage those non-structural carbohydrate levels in the total diet. So the forage is a huge piece of that that we have to manage, and then the feed, of course, as well. But if they just have PPID or Cushing's, like my gelding out here does, I just have to manage the feed portion of it is what I'm more concerned with. The forage isn't going to cause big problems with him as far as dried hay. I'm probably not going to throw him out on pasture that could be really high in fructans or sugars. I'm going to be more careful with that. And that's a whole nother topic we could get into.
Do a whole nother series on that, right?
Right? Yeah. But just kind of keeping it simple. If the horse has PPID or Cushing's, for him, again, he's on free choice forage, dried hay. I know it's never going to be excessive in NSC. And then I'm simply using that diet balance, or that Empower top line balance. I'm making sure I'm meeting all his key critical nutrient needs to their optimum level, which obviously helps him maintain a top line, even though he has Cushing's, right? He can have adequate lean muscle tissue. It's taking me managing that. If I was going to take him back to the show pen, I might even want to beef him up a little more. I might have to pull in, one of our products with like branched chain amino acids or something as a top dress supplement. The other big part of those guys is making sure they're exercise. So exercise if we can. I think it gets hard, right? I have to remind myself to exercise as well, but if we can take those guys for walks or do something with them, get creative, and I'd be curious, I guess, from the folks live here, if you want to post in the chat, if you guys have creative ideas of maybe how you help your horses exercise, your aging horses, because we know, right? I mean, in humans, if we eat healthy, we get plenty of rest, right? We keep our horses comfortable. We drink plenty of water and we exercise. We're prone to live longer. And so I'd be curious what ways that you guys as horse owners help your horses get more exercise, your senior horses. Are you placing some of their forage in different spots around, the dry lot or the pasture, kind of encouraging them to move more? Do you take them for walks? What do you do? But be curious. So Sorry, and I will mention too, if you do have a PPID horse with that struggles to maintain body condition, certainly the Safe Choice Senior, the Pro Force Senior can all be utilized as well with forage, or you can actually feed that as the sole diet if it needed to be. I think the only place where we'd kind of want to monitor with our veterinarian is if the horse was actually insulin dysregulated. Then we may need to see if that individual can handle that non-structured carbohydrate level as the sole diet.
Good point. Yeah, it's important.
That's a whole other topic.
Yeah, exactly. And always great to talk to your veterinarian to make sure that, you're covering all the bases. So
that is the critical key part. And I know you do this as well, but having that management program where you're working with your equine veterinarian, your farrier, and your nutrition component of it really makes for a healthy horse. I can't say that enough, of having, especially that vet and that farrier, work together and be on the same page. So
yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I think that is so key for a lot of this. So, well, I think actually that about wraps it up for us. Abby, we can't thank you enough for all of your knowledge and your help with our senior mares and geldings and stallions, etc. And like Abby mentioned, if you didn't get a chance to have your question answered, we are going back and we will definitely address your questions through the chat or through Facebook Messenger, etc. However you communicate with us, we will definitely get back to you. Make sure that you're doing all the things you need to do for keeping your senior horses healthy. So with that, thank you again. And we wish everybody the best. And we'll see you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tamara.
Thanks, Abby.